Deep in the shadows of Blackwood Forest, villagers have vanished without a trace. Hunters follow tracks that seem alive, and something waits in the darkness, part man, part wolf, with eyes that see everything. Tonight, we uncover the horrifying truth of the beast that has haunted this forest for generations. Dare you enter the woods, where the forest remembers. Blackwood Forest had always been a place of uneasy beauty. By day, its towering pines whispered gently in the wind, their shadows stretching long across the moss-covered earth. But by night, the forest transformed. The air thickened. The silence deepened, and the villagers who lived along its border locked their doors before the sun fully disappeared. It began with the disappearance of Thomas Hale, a local hunter who knew the forest better than any living soul. He left before dusk, rifle slung over his shoulder, promising to return before moonrise. He never did. The next morning, his dog was found wandering near the tree line, whimpering, trembling, its fur matted with something dark and drying. The search party entered Blackwood Forest just after dawn. They expected to find a broken ankle, perhaps a misstep near the ravine. Instead, they found his rifle snapped clean in two. Not rusted, not worn, broken as if twisted by impossible strength. Nearby, the earth was disturbed. Deep gouges marked the soil, spaced too evenly to belong to any known animal. And then there were the tracks' massive prints pressed into the mud. They resembled wolf tracks, but far too large, and far too deliberate. The men avoided looking at one another. No one wanted to say what they were thinking. That night, a sound echoed from within the forest. Not quite a howl, not quite human. It was something in between, long, mournful, and filled with hunger. Windows shuttered. Candles were extinguished, and for the first time in decades, Blackwood Forest did not feel empty. It felt occupied by the third night after Thomas Hale vanished. The village of Blackwood Crossing had fallen into a pattern of fearful routine. Doors were barred before sunset. Lanterns were dimmed. No one walked alone. Yet fear has a way of feeding curiosity, and curiosity eventually overcomes even the deepest dread. Sheriff Royce, a practical man with little patience for superstition, decided to retrace Thomas's final path. He gathered 2 deputies and entered Blackwood Forest just before dusk, determined to prove that whatever happened had a rational explanation. The trees seemed closer together than before. The air felt colder. Even the birds were silent. They followed the broken branches and faint scuffs left behind by boots. Nearly a mile in, they discovered something strange nailed to a tree trunk. It was Thomas's hunting knife. The blade was embedded deep into solid oak, far too high for any man to have placed it casually. The wood around it was splintered outward, as if something had forced it there with tremendous impact. Sheriff Royce reached up, struggling to pull it free. His hand trembled not from effort, but from the uneasy sensation that they were being watched. Behind them, a branch snapped. One of the deputies spun around, raising his rifle. Nothing. Only darkness weaving between trunks as they pressed deeper into the forest. The smell reached them first. Copper and decay. They found Thomas's pack torn open, supplies scattered like discarded bones. Then, 20 yards beyond, they found blood dark and dried along the roots of an ancient pine. But there was no body. Instead, there were more tracks, larger than before. And beside them, something new. Bootprints walking alongside the beast. Rumor spread faster than reason in Blackwood Crossing. By morning, whispers filled every corner of the village. Some claimed Thomas had angered something ancient. Others insisted a pack of wolves had migrated down from the northern ridges. But one person stepped forward with a story that silenced them all. Elias Mercer, a reclusive trapper who lived alone at the forest's edge, arrived at the sheriff's office pale and shaking. He had not come for attention. He had come because he could no longer bear the weight of what he had seen. 2 nights before, Thomas disappeared. Elias claimed he heard movement outside his cabin just past midnight. Not the light tread of deer. Not the frantic scurry of foxes. Something heavier, measured, deliberate. Elias had peered through the crack in his shutters. At first, he saw only darkness. Then the trees shifted. A tall silhouette emerged between them, broad-shouldered, unnaturally still. It stood on 2 legs. He described its posture as wrong. Its arms hung too long at its sides. Its head tilted as if listening. Then, slowly, it lifted its face toward the moonlight. Elias swore he saw fur ripple across its body, though it moved like a man. Its eyes reflected pale gold in the darkness, and when it inhaled deeply, he could see its breath fog in the cold air. The creature turned its head directly toward his cabin window. It knew he was watching. Elias dropped to the floor and did not move for nearly an hour. He heard footsteps circle the cabin, slow, heavy, scraping against wood. A claw dragged across the door, not pounding, not attacking, just testing. Then came the sound that would haunt him forever. A low growl that rose into something almost human, a distorted echo of pain and hunger combined. When dawn arrived, Elias found deep claw marks carved into his door and pressed into the soil outside. Were tracks identical to those found near Thomas Hale's blood. The room fell silent as Elias finished speaking. Sheriff Royce did not interrupt, because for the first time, even he could not explain what they were facing. Blackwood Forest was no longer hiding something wild. It was hiding something that haunted them. The morning after Elias Mercer's testimony, the forest felt different. Not louder, not darker, but watchful. Sheriff Alden Royce returned to the tree line with a larger party, this time 6 men armed with rifles, axes, and a confidence that felt increasingly fragile. Word had spread beyond Blackwood Crossing. Hunters from neighboring farms arrived, eager to prove the creature was nothing more than an overgrown wolf. They entered Blackwood Forest beneath a pale, cloud-covered sky. The air carried the faint scent of rain and pine sap. It did not take long before they found something. New trees, dozens of them, had been marked. Deep slashes carved vertically into bark, spaced evenly apart. Too high for a bear, too deliberate for chance. The marks formed a pattern, though no one could immediately decipher it. The slashes began near the northern ridge and curved slowly inward, funneling toward the heart of the forest. It was not random destruction. It was mapping. Territory claimed. One of the hunters knelt beside a marked trunk and ran his fingers along the gouges. Fresh sap bled from the wounds. Whatever had made them had done so recently. Then came the discovery that froze the group in place, pinned to one of the trees. Skewered by a sharpened branch hung the remains of a deer. Its body had been partially devoured, but not scattered. It was arranged, almost displayed. Sheriff Royce felt a creeping realization settle over him. Predators did not decorate their territory. They hunted. They fed. They moved on. This was something else. A gust of wind moved through the canopy above. And for a brief second, the men heard it again, that distant, distorted howl. It rolled between the trees, echoing unnaturally long, vibrating in their chests like a warning. One of the hunters whispered what the others were too afraid to say aloud. "It's not marking territory. It's hurting us." The forest around them seemed to close in, branches swaying, though no breeze could be felt at ground level. And somewhere beyond their line of sight, something shifted its weight in the undergrowth. They were no longer tracking the beast. The beast was guiding them by late afternoon. The hunting party had retreated to regroup at the edge of the forest. No one admitted fear outright, but it lingered in their silence. Sheriff Royce returned to his office and began searching through old land records, yellowed maps, handwritten journals. property deeds dating back nearly a century. Blackwood Forest, it seemed, had not always carried that name. An early survey from 1847 referred to it as Wolf's Reach Hollow. The notation beside it was brief. Settlers departed. Livestock losses. Unexplained incidents. No further explanation. No official investigation. Just abandonment. Royce felt unease settled deeper in his chest. He called for Margaret Ellison, the town's unofficial historian, a woman who remembered stories passed down from her. Grandmother Margaret arrived with a leather-bound journal wrapped in cloth. She hesitated before opening it, as though releasing something better left confined. Inside were copied letters from early settlers. Descriptions of livestock found mutilated, of shadows moving between trees at dusk, of a man-shaped wolf seen standing upright along the ridge. One entry stood out. It described a man named Gideon Blackwood, a trapper who lived alone deeper in the forest than anyone dared venture. The settlers believed he practiced strange rituals beneath the full moon. When livestock deaths increased, suspicion turned toward him. Then one winter, Gideon vanished. But the killings did not stop. Margaret's voice trembled as she read the final entry. It claimed the settlers attempted to burn Gideon's cabin to cleanse the land. But when they arrived, they found the structure already destroyed and, surrounding it, were enormous tracks circling the ruins. After that night, several families packed their belongings and left without explanation. The forest was renamed. The history quietly buried. Sheriff Royce leaned back in his chair, the weight of realization pressing upon him. If Gideon Blackwood had been more than a man, if something had survived beyond him, then this was not a random predator. It was a legacy. Outside, clouds rolled across the sky, obscuring the rising moon. And from somewhere far within Blackwood Forest, a distant howl answered the darkness, as though acknowledging that its name had finally been spoken again. Asterisk, the first snowfall of the season arrived early that year. By nightfall, Blackwood Crossing was buried beneath a thin, glistening layer of white. The forest beyond looked deceptively peaceful, branches heavy with frost. The world softened into silence. Sheriff Royce knew the full moon would rise before midnight. He organized a final watch at the forest's edge. Lanterns were placed along the tree line. Men stood spaced apart, rifles loaded, breath fogging in the bitter air. No one spoke of Gideon Blackwood aloud, but his name lingered in every thought. For nearly an hour, nothing moved. The snow reflected pale moonlight, turning the clearing into a silver stage. Then the howling began. It did not echo from deep within the forest. It came from behind them. One of the men turned just in time to see a shape dart between two barns at the village's edge. Tall, fast, moving, unnaturally fluid. A scream shattered the silence. By the time the others reached him, he was already gone, dragged across fresh snow toward the trees. The trail was easy to follow. Blood painted the white ground in violent streaks. But the drag marks ended abruptly 10 yards from the tree. Lying in their place were massive tracks, and something else. Bare human footprints. Walking beside them, the remaining men hesitated, only briefly before pursuing into Blackwood Forest. The snow muffled their steps, but ahead they heard movement, branches snapping. Something pacing in wide circles around them. Then they saw it. At the center of a small clearing stood a figure silhouetted against the moon. Broad shoulders, fur rippling across its frame. Its arms hung long and unnatural. Its head lifted slowly, revealing a face caught between wolf and man. Its eyes reflected gold, intelligent, aware. And when it opened its mouth, the sound that emerged was not purely animal. It carried something almost humans, something agonizingly familiar. The creature did not charge. It did not flee. It simply watched them, as if deciding, The village woke to a bitter silence. The morning after the red snow night. 3 men were missing. Their lanterns and rifles lay scattered at the forest edge, but no trace of their bodies could be found. Panic gripped Blackwood Crossing, and families whispered about leaving altogether. Amid the fear, 1 man returned. Daniel Frost, a young woodsman, staggered into town, covered in frost and mud, eyes wide with terror. He refused to speak at first, only pointing back toward the forest. Shaking violently, as if words could summon what had taken his friends, Sheriff Royce guided him to the office, offering a chair and a lantern. Daniel's story emerged slowly, in gasps and fragmented sentences. He had followed the group into the forest when the howls began. Snow muffled the sounds at first, but soon, he realized it was not the wind. Something moved in circles around them. Daniel described how the creature moved with uncanny intelligence. It mimicked human movements, pausing, crouching, circling, and always stayed just out of reach. He swore he saw shapes moving alongside it, human shadows walking in step with the beast. But distorted, inhuman, and unblinking, the men's rifles were useless. Bullets either missed or struck empty air, as if the forest itself shifted to protect the predator. In one desperate moment, Daniel had glimpsed a massive silhouette, leaping effortlessly from tree to tree. Arms extended, landing with a thud that shook the snow. When he finally ran, the forest seemed to guide him, funneling him through a narrow ravine and spitting him out onto the village road just before dawn. Sheriff Royce listened, noting every detail. He did not interrupt, nor did he offer consolation. Daniel's story was consistent with Elias Mercer's account, too consistent to ignore. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying a scent of blood and something fouled, almost metallic. Something alive, something waiting. Night fell quickly over Blackwood Crossing, blanketing the village in frost and darkness. The search party had camped at the edge of a clearing deep inside Blackwood Forest, their torches flickering against the snow and pine. Silence pressed against them like a living thing. Every snap of a branch or rustle of leaves made hearts pound. Then it came. A howl, unlike any ordinary wolf along. Guttural sound that began low and rose into something almost human, echoing across the trees with terrifying clarity. The snow vibrated with it. The men froze. Even the bravest hunter lowered his rifle, unsure whether to aim or flee. The howl was followed by movement shadows flickering between trees, large enough to blot out torchlight. The forest seemed alive with anticipation. Then the creature stepped into the clearing. Its body was massive, towering over the tallest man, fur matted with snow and blood. Its eyes gleamed gold, intelligent and cruel. Something unnatural accompanied it. Shapes half human, half shadow crept alongside the beast, mimicking its movements. The men could not tell where the wolf ended and the human began. A moment later, the creature lunged not at them, but toward the edge of the clearing. One of the men screamed and chased, only to find nothing but snow disturbed in concentric circles. The howl rose again, this time closer, as if surrounding them. Sheriff Royce realized they were no longer leading the hunt. They had become part of it. Every instinct screamed to run, but the forest had already closed in. Then, as suddenly as it began, the night returned to silence. Snow fell softly over broken branches and fading tracks. The clearing was empty, but the memory of gold eyes, of predatory intelligence, lingered in their minds like a curse. Blackwood Forest had spoken, and the villagers knew the beast was patient. It watched, it learned, and it waited. Weeks passed since the night of red snow, and fear settled like frost across Blackwood Crossing. Villagers rarely left their homes after dusk, and the missing remained absent. Their fate whispered, but never confirmed. Sheriff Royce knew that understanding the beast required knowledge of the forest's history of the land, the settlers, and the men who vanished long before. He recalled Elias Mercer's warning about the cabin deep in the northern ridge. The old structure had been abandoned for decades, supposedly burned to the ground. But something about the pattern of tracks and the beast's intelligence suggested a connection. With a small party, Royce ventured through a maze of pines. Snow crunching beneath their boots, mist curling around gnarled roots. The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became. Finally, they found it. The cabin was partially intact, hidden behind thick evergreens and frost-covered undergrowth. Broken windows revealed darkened interiors. Strange symbols were etched into the wall, circles intertwined with claw-like. Scratches faintly glowing in the moonlight. Inside, dust-covered old furniture. Broken tools lay scattered across the floor and on the walls. Sketches of tall wolf-like figures with human posture were drawn in crude charcoal. Some sketches had red stains, which Royce hoped were only rust or old paint. On the hearth, something drew Royce's attention. A journal, half buried beneath ash and soot. Its pages were brittle, handwritten notes interlaced with crude drawings, recounting the transformation of a man into something else under the full moon. The final entry ended abruptly. The forest will remember. I cannot stop it. The words hung in the air. A realization dawned on Royce. The beast was not merely an animal. It was tied to the forest, to the past, and perhaps to something much older than the settlers' stories. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying a faint, familiar growl. The past was alive, and it was watching Sheriff Royce close the journal, shivering despite his thick coat. The forest outside seemed to grow darker with every gust of wind, and the feeling of being watched pressed down on him like a physical weight. Returning toward the village, Royce's party noticed fresh tracks in the snow-massive paw-like prints intertwined with human footprints. The patterns were deliberate, almost playful, as if the predator wanted them to see it. The hairs along their necks stood on end. They pressed forward cautiously, moving toward the old logging road. That's when a voice called from the tree line, a man's voice, hoarse and trembling. "Stop. You don't know what you're walking into." The voice belonged to Jacob Marlowe, a former trapper who had left Blackwood Crossing years ago. His face was gaunt, skin weathered, eyes wide with fear. Jacob had spent the winter tracking the beast, hoping to understand it, but he had barely survived. He described how the creature was unlike any animal known. It hunted not only for food, but for knowledge, learning the behaviors of its prey. It had intelligence, cunning, and a way of manipulating the forest itself. Branches would fall to guide or block. Fog would rise to conceal or confuse. "The forest isn't just home to it," Jacob whispered. "It is it. The trees, the wind, the snow. Everything obeys it." Jacob warned that confronting the beast head-on would be suicidal. The only hope was patience, observation, and understanding its patterns. The longer it went unchecked, the bolder it would become. He spoke of claw marks forming strange symbols, of human-like silhouettes appearing alongside the beast, and of a presence that seemed to remember anyone who dared enter its territory. Sheriff Royce absorbed every word, realizing that to face the beast of Blackwood Forest, he needed more than rifles and lanterns. He needed knowledge. He needed a plan and, most importantly, he needed to respect the forest as the wind howled between the pines. The golden eyes watching from deep inside the trees seemed to gleam brighter, as if sensing that someone finally understood its game. Jacob Marlowe did not stay in the village long. He refused a bed, refused food, refused comfort. Instead, he spread a series of crude maps across the sheriff's desk, hand-drawn sketches of Blackwood Forest, marked with circles and slashes. Each mark corresponded with a disappearance, each symbol aligned with a full moon. Sheriff Royce studied the pattern carefully. The attacks were not random. They followed a widening spiral that began at the ruins of Gideon Blackwood's cabin and expanded outward with each passing month. The beast was not simply hunting. It was expanding its territory, and the next full moon was only 2 nights away. Old wooden desk covered in hand-drawn forest maps with spiral markings. Lantern casting warm glow, snow visible through window. Tense investigative horror atmosphere. Jacob pointed to the center of the spiral, the northern ridge. It returns there every time, he said. Not to rest. To change. The word hung heavily in the air. Royce remembered the journal entry. The forest will remember. If the beast was once a man, if Gideon Blackwood had become something else, then perhaps. The transformation was tied to that place. The cabin ruins were not just a memory. They were an anchor. Outside, the wind began to rise. Clouds swallowed the stars, and a faint tremor of distant howling drifted across the rooftops of Blackwood Crossing. That night, livestock vanished from the outskirts of town. Fences were torn apart, not chewed or broken, but ripped cleanly from the ground. The tracks left behind circled the barns in perfect loops. Before disappearing toward the ridge, it was preparing. Jacob's voice trembled as he spoke one final warning. When the moon reaches its highest point, it won't hide anymore. It will stand in the open. Sheriff Royce made his decision. They would not wait for another attack. They would go to the ridge on the night of the full moon, not to chase, not to hunt blindly, but to confront the source as the clouds parted briefly. Moonlight spilled across the village and in the distant tree line. 2 golden eyes blinked slowly before vanishing into shadow. The night of the full moon arrived with biting cold. Snow-blanketed Blackwood Crossing, reflecting the pale light of the moon and casting long shadows across rooftops and frozen fields. Sheriff Royce gathered a small group of villagers, brave or desperate enough to accompany him. Jacob Marlowe, 2 hunters, and Elias Mercer, whose warnings had long gone unheeded. They moved silently toward the northern ridge. Following the spiral pattern mapped by Jacob, lanterns glowed faintly in the frost. But each step felt heavy, weighed down by fear. The forest was alive with whispers, branches scraping, snow shifting. The faint crunch of unseen paws every 100 yards. They found evidence of the beast's passage, claw marks gouged into trees. Snow disturbed in deliberate patterns, and footprints, human and animal, walking side by side. The further they went, the more they felt they were entering a world governed by rules that were not theirs. At the halfway point, Elias stopped abruptly. He knelt beside the snow, tracing massive wolf-like prints and smaller human ones. "It wants us to follow," he whispered. "Every step we take, it knows. Every breath we take, it feels." A howl answered from deep within the ridge, long and mournful, vibrating through the frozen pines. The group froze as it echoed again, closer this time, circling them in the cold air. Their lanterns flickered, and the shadows between the trees seemed to grow taller. More distinct, more purposeful. Sheriff Royce drew his rifle, gripping it tightly, though he knew bullets alone would not save them. "Stay together," he said, voice low and steady, masking the tremor of fear in his chest. "Whatever it is, we face it as one." The final stretch of the path brought them to a clearing atop the ridge. Moonlight poured over a ruined cabin, Gideon Blackwood's cabin, partially hidden beneath snow and tangled branches. Around it, tracks spiraled outward like the arms of a dark web. The air was thick with copper and pine, a scent of blood mixed with decay. From the shadows, golden eyes gleamed briefly before disappearing into the darkened tree line. The group was no longer hunters. They were the prey. The ridge clearing was silent, but the silence was suffocating. Every breath seemed amplified in the cold night air. The group huddled near the cabin, each member scanning the shadowed edges of the tree line. Golden eyes glinted briefly between the pines, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Jacob Marlowe whispered, "It's watching us, learning us, waiting for a mistake." A low growl rumbled from the tree line, vibrating through the snow-covered ground. The hunters gripped their rifles, but no bullet could pierce the intelligence behind those eyes. This was not a simple predator, was calculating then movement. Shadows flickered among the trees, forming shapes both human and wolf-like. They stepped forward with deliberate caution, circling the clearing. The group's lanterns swung in the cold wind, casting long, trembling shadows across the snow. Image prompt 1. Snowy forest ridge under full moon. Shadowy humanoid wolf-like figures moving among trees, golden eyes gleaming from darkness. Tense cinematic horror realism. From behind a ruined wall of the cabin, a hulking figure emerged, standing upright. Fur matted with snow and blood, claws extended, eyes glowing like molten gold. Its head tilted, as if assessing the intruders. Beside it, smaller shapes, twisted, humanoid silhouettes mirrored its posture. Elias Mercer stepped forward, voice quivering. "It remembers us. The forest. It's part of it, and it knows we've come to its center." The creature emitted a chilling howl, low and resonant, that seemed to split the night in two. The sound was filled with hunger, fury, and something else, recognition. The group instinctively held their ground, hearts pounding, rifles trembling in hands. The creature moved forward, slow but deliberate, circling the party. Every snap of a branch under its weight sent shivers down the spines of the men. It paused, head cocked, sniffing the air. Eyes locking on Sheriff Royce. A guttural growl morphed into a sound that was almost speech-like, a warning in a language long forgotten. The group realized then that they were facing not just a beast, but a guardian. A creature that had survived through generations, bound to the forest and its secrets. And in that moment, the line between hunter and hunted blurred completely. The cold night pressed in from all sides. Sheriff Royce and his small group stood in the clearing, trembling yet determined. The beast had circled them for what felt like hours, its golden eyes reflecting every flicker of torchlight. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the creature stepped closer, its presence commanding the snow-covered ground. Jacob Marlowe whispered urgently, "It's testing us. Whatever happens, don't make a sudden move. It wants to know if we're afraid." The air vibrated with tension. The humanoid forms beside the beast distorted and shadowy shifted slightly, mimicking its stance. For the first time, the group realized the creature was not alone in purpose. Its influence extended beyond flesh, blending the forest and its prey into a single, living trap. Suddenly, a roar split the night. The creature leaped onto a fallen tree trunk, towering above the men. Its howl was deafening, echoing across the ridge, shaking snow from branches. The humans froze in awe and terror. Then the beast crouched, muscles rippling, claws scraping the snow, waiting for the group's next move. Sheriff Royce realized that confrontation alone would lead to death. Instead, he spoke softly, almost a whisper, acknowledging the creature's existence. "We mean no harm. We only seek understanding." For a moment, the golden eyes studied him. Then the creature lowered its head, nostrils flaring before it turned and vanished into the tree line. The shadowy humanoid shapes melted into the night with it. Silence returned, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines by dawn. The group returned to Blackwood Crossing, shaken but alive. The forest was quiet, but the legend had grown heavier. The beast remained unchallenged, patient, and eternal, a guardian of its domain. A creature of myth brought to life. Sheriff Royce kept one thought close to his chest. Blackwood Forest had not been defeated. It had simply waited for those who dared enter, for those who sought its secret, and for the inevitable night when the full moon would rise again. The villagers would remember the night forever. And somewhere deep in Blackwood Forest, golden eyes blinked slowly in the shadows, watching, waiting, and howling a sound that would haunt the forest for generations. The beast still roams Blackwood Forest, watching, learning, and waiting. Every full moon, it claims its territory and tests anyone who dares enter. Sheriff Royce and the villagers survived. But the forest never forgets. And somewhere in the shadows, the golden eyes are still there, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too far. Will you be the next to hear its howl?